Well, hello, retro game players. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Marcus, and welcome to another top 10 list for the PS4. Thank you so much for subscribing and watching these videos, you guys. I really appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed, make sure you do that because there's lots of videos like this. In fact, this is the 5th video just for the PS4. And so this one is going to be the top 10 action platformers with a physical release. I can't wait to show you guys these titles. They are amazing. So let's jump right into it. So I used to work with this guy who would come into work every day with a 2-liter of Mountain Dew. He would take a king-size pack of sour Skittles, dump it into the Mountain Dew, and drink that every day. For like 2 years, this guy drank this. It was insane. I mention it because a lot of these games on this list are going to have a sweet and sour element to them. Sweet could be great gameplay, graphics, and then the sour could be difficulty, right? Something like that. Some kind of a contrast. So hopefully you guys brought something you can enjoy while we watch this and go through each one, because it's going to be a little bit tart and a little bit sweet at times. So first off, I'm talking about Rad Rogers. Now, Rad Rogers is a game that is a shooter at its heart, all right? You're this kid, you got this robot on your back, and it's kind of all self-aware humor. It's like, you know, all video game-based humor. Really interesting. Sometimes it's extremely like R-rated humor, which is sort of funny because the graphics don't match that at all, but it happens. The positives of this game are that the graphics are really good. The shooting mechanic is actually pretty fun. The platformer element is really good as well. Throughout each level, you want to find these runes, and as you collect, I think 3 of them, you unlock the final exit. Throughout each level, though, there's going to be a glitched out area where you have to enter this little area, and when you do that, you go to this whole nother gameplay mode where you play the robot, and he goes around inside this weird world, sort of glitch world, and he solves these basic puzzles. For the first few levels, not a problem. But as the game advances, it gets harder and harder to figure out what actually is going on. And you have only like split seconds to figure out these puzzles. And if you don't finish it within like a second or 2 seconds of, you know, actually solving it, it starts all the way over. So they get tougher. It gets pretty frustrating. There's only about 7 levels in this game of actual gameplay. Now, each level is pretty long, which is cool, and you start out with this overhead map, and you kind of go through each one that way, but then they have these other, like, platforming sort of endless jumping levels, and they say P on them, which is kind of weird, but you go to the P levels, and you just jump, and just go straight up as far as you can go, all right? And it's kind of like thrown in there for bonus points. I don't really think that that was worth putting into the game. The boss battles are really not very good. They repeat. They're more like mini boss battles, except for the final boss at the end of the game. All in all, I feel like this game had a lot of great stuff going for it, but it just couldn't bring it home because they kept adding these weird things into it. You know, it didn't need those platforming levels where you're endless jumping. The mini boss, those suck. And the final boss was okay, but again, you toggle over to the robot throughout it to go to that glitch world and help solve it. And it just screws up the pace of the game. You know, they should have just removed the glitch world entirely and got rid of the robot guy. Things would have been a lot better. So with that said, you know, all in all, Rad Rogers is definitely fun. The music is pretty cool. I think, you know, if you can get it for a good deal, it's worth picking up. So we're going to move up to number 9. Alright, the number 9 game is a game that was sent to me by Strictly Limited Games. Thank you guys so much. I'm talking about Bunnies Must Die, Chelsea and the Seven Devils. This is an anime-style Metroidvania game. You play as Chelsea. She's dressed up like a bunny, or more specifically, maybe a Playboy bunny. but it is very cool. It reminds me of a TurboGrafx 16 style game. Everything from just the graphics, the music, and really like the level design, enemies, that kind of thing. It just reminds me of something that would be on the TurboGrafx. But yeah, you're playing Chelsea, you get weapon upgrades. My personal favorite was the boomerang. The thing is awesome. It just tears up enemies. You can aim it in any direction. Really cool how it just bounces around. If you ever upgrade to another weapon, you lose that previous one. So you want to remember that as you're going through each level if you find one you like. Similar to other Metroidvania games, you're going to encounter areas you can't pass, either without a key. It's really not a key, it's sort of an orb, or just other areas that you can't get through because you haven't achieved a certain power or the ability to do that. For example, you also get a time stopping mechanic where you can stop time. That enables you to get to areas and get past enemies that were previously really tough to get through. And you can also kind of turbo boost and run through areas. And there's certain sections where there's like a button you hit and it opens up a gate, and the gate, you know, actually counts down. It says you have 5 seconds to get through it. You definitely have to use your turbo boost to get through it. So all in all, I really had fun with this game. It was actually pretty cool. I did die a lot, but fortunately, you can get back to the gameplay real quick. There are checkpoints, save areas, pretty frequent throughout each level. So great job on this game. Really fun. If you guys can find this one, check it out. But let's move up to number 8. Number 8. Alright, so this next game is an extremely difficult platformer, but really interesting gameplay mechanics. I'm talking about Super Gunworld 2. No, there is not a Super Gunworld 1, so this is the first one, and it's actually really cool. You're basically playing this guy who lives in this world where you find seeds, and you can plant a seed and a gun will grow instantly. And so you can get different guns that way. There's like turrets that you can use. And also there's different gameplay modes. Like one is where you just go in and it's like straight up arcade style, where it's like level 1, level 2, level 3, and it's just a, you know, straight up linear path. But the other one is where it's an overhead map, kind of like the original Zelda, where you walk around the map. And there are enemies walking around. If you happen to touch one, you enter into not a battle, but a level. And those levels can be really difficult, and you really can't get through it unless you beat that level. But they're sort of like mini levels. And then, you know, you can go and check out dungeons and just different areas. But yeah, the gameplay is super classic platforming with some shooter elements. The enemies are interesting. It totally will bring back major nostalgia in a weird way, because it's like, as you're playing it, you're like, this is so familiar, but I've never played this. The music is something I have to say was some of the coolest music I've heard. Specifically, the arcade music in the town. It is so cool. And actually up on stage is Megaran, which is pretty interesting. So he's like rapping, but the song that plays in the background is just really chill. And I can honestly just like leave that on and do other stuff. So anyway, it's a really fun game. If you're looking for something with some major retro style, this is it. I think you guys will dig this one for sure. I would absolutely recommend this one. So that's number 8. Let's move up to number 7. Number 7. All right, the number 7 game on this list, I'm actually going to throw in 2 because one is the original, the other is the sequel. These are some pretty awesome games. They are available on quite a few different systems. I know they're going to be on the Switch as well, but I'm talking about Mutant Mudds. All right, so Mutant Mudds, this is the first game. This is the deluxe edition on PS4, and then this is the sequel, which is Mutant Mudds Super Challenge. If you haven't played this before, it's a very, very classic platformer. You have a little pea shooter type gun. You have a jetpack. And it's really pretty tough. You have 3 hit points. As you're going through each level, there are some really cool things that they did with this game. One of them is that you can enter the foreground and background of each level. So there's actually like 3 planes of view as you're playing. It's really pretty interesting. It's similar to another game that we'll be talking about later on in this list. But all in all, it is so tough. In fact, this game, Mutant Mudds Deluxe, I would say is really hard, but then the sequel, although I like this one a little better, is even harder. So both of these are tough. They're going to challenge you. They're going to, man, I'm telling you right now, I mentioned, you know, the sweet and sour. The gameplay, the style is super sweet, but the sour side of this is it's brutal. There's moments where, honestly, I was just like so frustrated. But I like that it's so instant. Like I've said that before with games like Super Meat Boy. Really challenging, but as long as I get back into the action and start again, you know, I'm feeling pretty good about it. What sucks is that sometimes you're really pretty far, you know, in the level, and then you'll die, and you really go all the way back. There are these checkpoints, so that's cool. That kind of makes things a little easier, but it still can be pretty frustrating when you're right to the end. One thing I like about this game, though, is that the way it's designed, it feels like you're playing, I don't know how to describe this, but you're playing like you really get immersed into this world. And you almost feel like this kind of claustrophobic thing that happens when the camera focuses on the foreground and then it comes back to the background and then you're at the original plane of view. Like there's something about it where it makes you feel like you're really in the game. It's very unusual. I honestly think you guys would have to play it to understand what I'm talking about. But anyway, classic platformer. You know, you will need to shoot your enemies too because they're flying around and you got to dispatch those guys before things get out of hand. You know, but yeah, I honestly thought this was way cooler than I thought it was going to be. I had heard good things about it, but playing it is a whole other story. So if you like challenging platformers, definitely recommend Mutant Mudds. Okay, we're moving up to number 6. Number 6. Okay, the number 6 game on this list is one that's got some sort of espionage style to it. It's one that kind of took me by surprise. I was not expecting that this was going to be this good. I'm talking about Shadow Complex. And this one was actually really impressive as far as the gameplay itself goes, but I really like the graphics because it's sort of hyper realistic, but you know, there's a limit to it. It's still got the 2D side-scrolling thing going on. There's parts of this game that remind me of the newer Strider game, but again, it's got its own thing going on, and you know, you're basically this guy going through these levels, sort of futuristic. You know, you have grenades, you've got your guns, and you know, there's different areas you can go to. You can explore each area. The areas themselves and the levels look really good, and they're very immersive. It's like, I don't know, it's kind of like playing like G.I. Joes or something. Like it just reminds me of that. And yeah, I mean, all in all, I was really impressed with this game. I didn't expect it to be such a good sort of platformer. But yeah, I mean, you actually have wall jump abilities. You know, like you can explore and get to different areas. It actually does have sort of a Metroidvania style to it. And there's always like an indication of where you need to go. So a couple times I did get stuck, but then I'd remember, check my map, and I'd be able to figure out exactly where I need to go. So if you like games, I would say that are like Metal Gear Solid or Siphon Filter, but not in 3D, this is a good selection because it does have that sort of vibe to it, and it's just well done. The graphics are really good, the gameplay's fun, and it's not very frustrating. Like, I honestly had a good time playing it, and yeah, I highly recommend this one. So before we go up to number 5, we've got a word from our sponsor.
When you've lost your last man, hold A and B to continue where you left off. Do this before the title screen appears.
All right, the number 5 game on this list is one that was actually made by the same team that made Mutant Mudds. They're called Renegade Kid, and this one has some similar gameplay style to it, except a much more stylized emphasis based on Metroid. And I'm talking about Xeodrifter. So in Xeodrifter, you're playing this little space dude, and he can go between 4 different planets. Each planet definitely has some hostile creatures, but you can upgrade your suit, your weapons. You can choose how you distribute your upgrade points, which is actually pretty cool. And those things affect things like power, fire rate, the pattern, whether it's a spread gun, that kind of thing. And you can adjust that as you go, which is really pretty cool. The gameplay itself is unique in that as you go, you'll go to like areas that have water, and you'll enter like a submarine. And the other thing that's interesting is because it was made by the same guys who did Mutant Mudds, you can travel to the background. And so you'll enter into an area where you'll see something behind you in the background, and if you line up the levels and you can see that you can go there, you can actually do that. And sometimes you have to do that for boss battles. So for certain boss battles, you will be jumping back and forth between the different planes to beat that boss. As you go, you're going to encounter sections on each planet that are completely messed up. There's going to be an enemy you cannot pass, and so you're going to have to go back and explore some of the other planets to find different power-ups to get stronger so you can come back and really take them on. So this game actually has really cool music, stylized graphics. You can run, you get different abilities. One is you can run across like hot surfaces or fire. So there's definitely cool platforming going on, really unique gameplay. Personally, I like this one more than Mutant Mudds just because it's got that old school, Metroid style to it. So that's why I liked it. It just seemed a little more, a little more charming to me, something that I connected with more. So if you guys liked Mutant Mudds, check this out. If you think that you might like this one, I would recommend this one. So there you go. That's number 5. Let's move up to number 4. All right, the next game on this list is one that was actually made by Studio Pixel. They're the guys that brought us Cave Story, which is an awesome game. But this one is called Kero Blaster. Now in Kero Blaster, you're playing like this weird lizard guy, and it's got some of the most stylish retro graphics I've seen. Really authentically like 8-bit style. And what's going on is you have these different weapons you can upgrade. You start out with like a really pathetic like laser weapon. You slowly can upgrade it. As you destroy enemies in each level, you get currency, and then you can buy upgraded weapons. And so some of the weapons as you go get really cool, and they just increase in range or power. There's this crazy bubble weapon, which is absolutely brilliant. But yeah, as you go, it's pretty linear. You just go straight through the levels, but they do get tougher. The platforming is really good. The enemy design is really good. This game is like bleeding retro style, though. It's just awesome. The music is really well done. I was so impressed with this game. So, the other thing that's cool is you can find this on pretty much everything. So if you're looking for this game, you can find it on almost anything. I really enjoyed playing it on the PlayStation 4, so that's why this is number 4. We've only got 3 games left. Let's move right up to number 3. All right, so the number 3 game on this list is one that I really, really enjoyed. It's made by the same guys who did Super Hydra, which I talked about in my Shmups video. And these guys have a great skill and talent at making these retro throwback styled games. And this one is one that they tried to make basically like a Ghosts and Goblins game. And I'm talking about Curse Castilla. So in Curse Castilla, you're kind of like this little knight guy going around in these haunted and sort of medieval castles. Each level is actually really well done. It has quite a few similarities to Ghosts and Goblins, with the exception of you have 3 hit points, which is a little more forgiving. The level design is a little more forgiving. So all in all, it's a little easier. but it still will put you through your paces. And if you don't want to get the PS4 version, because unfortunately this game shot up in price. You know, when I got this, it was like $30 on PlayAsia. They have a Vita version that is, I think, a little cheaper, but it's also on Steam, and it's under the name Matilda's Castle. So if you're looking for a game that has a Ghosts and Goblins feel and you've got a computer, like, check out the Steam version. I was so impressed with this one, and just the soundtrack is such a throwback to the Sega Genesis. Really, the old Sega Genesis games like Last Battle or Death Duel, something like that, where it's not quite as awesome as like the later games like Bloodlines, but it's cool. It sounds like the Genesis is doing like the actual sound work on this, and graphically, again, like spot on classic gameplay. I think you guys will dig this. If you're looking for a good action platformer with sort of a dark twist, this is it. It's also extremely linear. You know, you've got an overworld map screen just like Ghosts and Goblins, and you know, you just progress through each one. Fortunately, the game does save as you go, which makes it a little easier to do. You don't have to beat it in one sitting. There are multiple endings depending on how well you beat the game or how good you are while you play, you know, how many continues you use, that kind of thing. So anyway, awesome game. Highly recommend this one. Super, super fun. Let's move up. We've only got 2 left. Let's get to 2. Alright, so the number 2 game on this list stirred up quite a bit of controversy regarding plagiarism, larger companies like IGN copying smaller YouTubers, bunch of crap. Fortunately, this game rises up above all that shit and is very good and very well done, and I'm talking about Dead Cells. So in Dead Cells, every single time you play, the level design will change slightly. It's not drastically different, but it is different. As you go, you basically find different weapons, and you know, you'll get like bombs or different freeze spells, and you can only carry certain ones. So as you come across a new one, you have to choose which weapon to replace. Fortunately, as you go, you can earn money, and you can then buy upgrades which are permanent. And so that means when you die, you start all the way back at the very beginning of the game, but you have a permanent upgrade, like the ability to retain money that you lost, you know? So similar to like something like Dark Souls, when you die and you lose all your soul points, you go back and you can get it. Well, in this case, you would lose them, but if you possess the ability to keep all of your money, or up to 3,000 is one level, the next one is 6,000 coins, that makes it so much easier, because then you can actually, you know, proceed, keep increasing it. You also come across cells, which count as a type of currency as well, and you can also buy upgrades and upgrade different things with your character, which is really cool. The enemies are all really unique. They all have a different attack strategy that you have to do. Your guy can roll, you know, he can use his sword, he's got like a bow and arrow, he has a freeze attack, grenades, lots of different, you know, options for that. It's funny because some of the enemies remind me of like Vector Man, which sounds kind of bizarre, but they just kind of remind me of Vector Man. The graphics are really, really beautiful though. Like across the board, as you go, each level looks so like, I don't know, really well done. You can go down to like sewers, and those look really creepy and just damp, and then you're out in the sky and it looks really like awesome sunsets. And anyway, really cool. Also kind of reminds me of like some weird version of Groundhog Day, because you die and you start all the way back over, but you do retain like, you know, some of the stuff that you've been able to collect. And that's what makes this game different than like some other rogue games where you die and you lose everything and you're just starting a fresh new game. That's not how this one is, which makes it way more forgiving to people who don't like rogue games. So anyway, that's my take on it. I was really impressed. The music also is really well done, so I did want to make special mention of that. I think you guys will like this game. It's definitely got a really fast, furious action style to it, and the platforming element is definitely good. It's so refreshing to see games like this being made, honestly. And it keeps you playing. Like, it makes you want to keep going and upgrading your character and just getting better and better. So that's Dead Cells. We've only got one game left. Let's jump right into it. Alright guys, so that was 9 awesome games. Of course, as you know, we've only got one that'll come out on top. This one is one that really, really blew me away. The more I heard about it, the more I wanted to play it. And the more I found out about how it was made was even more interesting. This game was made all by one person. His name's Thomas Happ. He did all the graphics, the programming, the soundtrack. It's absolutely mind-blowing that someone could do all this stuff and make such a quality game. So the number one game in the action platformer category is going to be Axiom Verge. So Axiom Verge is one that is extremely heavily influenced by Metroid. It definitely has the Metroidvania thing, but it just reminds me more of like Metroid, classic Metroid. The graphics are there, maybe Super Metroid, but yeah, the graphics are really good. You're going through this sort of weird alien realm. Something went wrong in sort of this experiment that he was conducting, and so that's sort of what happened. He's like a scientist, and things kind of went wrong. And then as you go, it's the levels get sprawling. The colors, the way that the colors are used, so well done. The bosses are also really cool. The music is absolutely unreal. I cannot tell you how cool the music is. It's an album that I actually made sure I was able to pick up on vinyl. I really dig it. So, that's another thing. But yeah, as you go, you can upgrade your weapons. Your guy, he ends up jumping higher. Basically that same kind of formula where you'll find an area and you're like, oh, I can't get through here. You have all these other abilities that are just things that, I don't know, like I've never thought anyone would think of. Like, you have like this big drill, you can go through certain blocks to access areas that you couldn't get to before. You also have like a kind of a glitch gun where you can shoot out this ray that makes blocks appear as either platforms or enemies. You can shoot and turn them into like a glitch. I mean, just really unique gameplay style. Out of every game I've talked about in this list, this is the one that I want to keep playing, and I always want to just like keep playing even after I've died. It is so well done. So if you haven't heard of this or you haven't had a chance to play it, I cannot recommend Axiom Verge enough. It is completely worth your time. If you like games like Super Metroid or any other games on this list, this one in my mind is just the best. So there you go. Hopefully you guys liked this list. What are some games that maybe I missed? I do have a couple other videos I'm planning. I mentioned it before, but next will be the 1990 Genesis list, and then I've got a couple other ones which I'm not going to spoil, but I appreciate you guys watching and subscribing. Thank you so much. I really, really want to thank you guys for watching this all the way through. So until next time, you guys know what to do. You keep that shit retro by playing Axiom Verge on the PS4 later on.